Hey guys, it's Sam for Digital Meet again, and in this Cinema 4D tutorial video we're going to be looking at how we can set up a metal rough material in Cinema 4D. So let's just go over this scene quick. I've got a cube in the center of our view here, and you can see it's got quite a bit of subdivision going on there, and we'll come to that in a minute. And the scene is just basically a floor. We've got a sky for our reflections with a HDR, and we've got the camera that's locked off, and that's the view we're looking through now. And that's pretty much it. And this is the scene that we're going to be using to actually view the material on this box object. Also, I have a Unity scene set up with these three boxes in it, with some materials I've already set up here. And these are the materials that we're going to be recreating inside Cinema 4D. Now, the reason that I've set this scene up is for its comparative value, really. These materials and their maps have been set up within Unity's standard shader that shader is built for. So you just plug in your maps, and this is the result that you get. So we can use this scene to compare to what we're seeing in Cinema 4D to make sure that we're doing things correctly. Okay, so first things first. Some of you may be thinking, I don't know what you mean when you're saying metal rough. It's also referred to sometimes as metallic roughness. It's just a way of authoring materials which gives you a certain set of texture maps. There's also another well-known method called spec gloss or specular glossiness. So the two main types of authoring is spec gloss and metal rough. I prefer metal rough. I just prefer authoring materials that way. I use them in Unity, and I'd like to be able to use them in Cinema 4D as well. So let's have a look at a set of metal rough textures and just go over them quickly and talk about what each one of these textures does. I should imagine I'm preaching to the choir with a lot of you, but some I may not be. So let's have a look at these quick. So this is a wooden floor material. In fact, this is the material for this object here. So let's just talk about these quickly. First, we've got the wood floor, and you can see underscore AO. This is ambient occlusion, and the purpose of this map is to darken up places of the object that this map is on. And we can even use this to darken up reflections, darken up the specular, even luminance actually. So where this map is white, it'll have no effect, and where it's darker, it'll have a diffusion effect. Moving on, next we have the base color, sometimes also known as the albedo map. This is the actual color of the object, obviously, as the name implies, but this map shouldn't have any lighting information in it whatsoever. This should be pure color with no shadowing, no specular highlights, nothing like that. It's just color. Next we have the height map, and this will determine the relative height of the surface of an object. Typically, full black will either be 0 or pushing backwards, and white will be pushing outwards, and the height map will define that. Next we've got a metallic map. This literally determines whether something's metal or not. A lot of the time you'll see that this map is just pure black, and the way this map works is if something's black, it is not metal, and if there's sections of the map that is white, well then that part of the map is defined as a metal. There really shouldn't be any in between, because something's either a metal or not, i.e. a dielectric, a non-metal, or metallic, a conductor. Next we have the normal map, and I'm sure you're all familiar with this map. This is a lot like a bump map, which uses black and white to determine sort of surface height. Normal map's kind of the same thing, but there's an element of directionality to it as well. So that's why you're getting this kind of purple colour. This is what a normal map should look like. And then we get the roughness map, and this determines what part of the object that this map is on is smooth or rough. And because this is a roughness map, the darker it is, the more smooth it is, and the more white it is, the more rough it is. On this map in particular, you'll see that these areas here aren't very rough, but then you'll get patches where it gets rougher, like here. So now we've gone over the maps that is used in a metal rough workflow, we can actually start jumping in and plugging them into our Cinema 4D material. I've got no lights in the scene at present. I'm using my HDR map down here, which is on my sky object, and I've got its texture in the luminance channel. And I've got global illumination turned on in my render settings, and that's what we're going to use to light the scene. If I just give this a quick render now, you'll get an idea of what the scene looks like. So let's close that and create our material. And we'll open this up and we'll call this wood floor, because that's what we're going to deal with first. So, colour. It's pretty obvious. We can plug in our base colour map, and this, let's get this on our material as well. And also I know that my maps are 2K, so I'm actually going to go into the editor slot here and make sure that they're displayed at 2K in the viewport. There we go, a little bit more detail now. So that's pretty much it for the colour map. You can also see that we've got a specular highlight here, and that's because when you create a Cinema 4D material, it's always got this default specular in. Now I'm going to remove that. I rarely use specular in Cinema 4D because it is basically like a fake reflection. I'd rather have an actual reflection instead of sort of like a fake specular, so I'm going to get rid of that. So that's our colour dealt with. Next we've got diffusion. Now this is where our ambient occlusion map goes, so let's plug that in. So there's our wood AO, so we can plug that in there. And it's very subtle. You notice that in the cracks there, if I turn this on and off, it kind of darkens up those areas slightly. So far, if we give this a render, very flat looking. We've got a bit of detail picked out in our ambient occlusion, but that's pretty much it for now. Reflectance, I'm going to skip over for now and actually just deal with the easier maps. So next we have our normal map. So we turn the normal channel on, open up our textures, and we plug in our normal map. Now there's something important to know about the Mograph workflow. It depends what you're authoring these maps in. So if you're using something like Marmoset or Substance Painter or something like that, and you choose their preset, Mograph, and kick these out, more than likely you're going to get a very particular type of normal map. You might even find that if you download a texture set from an online material library, you'll say, oh, that's a nice material, I'll grab that. You grab it, you download it, and you'll find that you've got two normal maps in there. And that's because one is DirectX and the other is OpenGL. Now, Cinema uses OpenGL by default, but it can use DirectX as well. Now, I know for a fact that when I created these textures, I did it as a normal Mograph workflow. So these normal maps are actually a DirectX normal map. So if you do plug in a DirectX normal map to your normal channel in Cinema 4D, you need to flip the y-axis. So you need to check this on. Now these normal maps will behave correctly within Cinema 4D. Moving on to displacement, this is where the height map goes. There's a difference between my Unity scene here and my displacement, because even though the height map is plugged into my materials in here, they don't actually tessellate the surface of the geometry and push them out. It's kind of like a faked effect. You can do that in Unity, but you're going to have to use a different shader to the one that I'm using now. But in Cinema 4D, this height map will actually determine what's displaced. So if I turn this on, in fact, let's get a shot of this before displacement and after, because displacement will only occur at render time unless we put a displacement deformer on the object or something like that. So that's what it looks like without. And if I turn on the displacement and actually load our height map into this, there we go, our height map, you can see that we got a height of 10 centimeters. That's far too much, and I think even 1 centimeter would be a bit extreme for a pretty flat material. It's a floor, so I'm going to put 0.5 in there, and let's give this another render. Okay, that's not bad. There's a subtle difference between these two. Something else to take note of it as well is this intensity. We've got the type intensity centered. What that means is that anything on this map that is black will be pushed backwards into the object, whereas anything that's white gets pushed out. Now you can actually turn this to intensity, so what that means is anything that's black will basically be 0, so it doesn't get pushed back in. That's kind of its baseline. So anything black will be the baseline, and then it just deals with anything lighter than black gets pushed outwards. So you can choose whether you want it being pushed in and out in both directions or just outwards. Okay, so that's all the maps dealt with, all the easy to deal with maps. Something else I should note as well, you may get more maps than I showed in my folder earlier. You may also get an opacity map, which deals with whether you can see through parts of the map or not, and that would typically go in your alpha channel. And you might even get a emission map, and that would go in the luminance channel. So there might be parts of your map that actually emiss, they light up. In this case it's a floor, so both of those things do not apply. Okay, now onto the reflectance channel. Now this is where all the sort of action takes place really, and this is how we're going to set it up. I'm going to add a GGX, and that's what you want to go for really. And I'm going to rename this layer, and you can see that it's completely changed the surface of our thing to this sort of metal. And I'm going to say that this is my dielectric layer. Dielectric basically means non-conductor. Anything like plastic or wood or anything like that is considered a dielectric. So first things first then, with our dielectric layer, global reflection, brightness can be left alone. All of this stuff can be left alone. We want GGX here. The attenuation can be left alone as well. Leave it on average. Now roughness, we can turn this right up, because you can see actually by looking in the viewport that down here it's very, very smooth, and we're getting some reflective details here, and right up here it's very rough, so the reflection is very diffused. Now we want our map, our roughness map, to determine whether this is rough or not, and that's why we've got to turn it all the way up. So let's go grab that map. We'll open this up and we'll grab our roughness, and now that's plugged in, and you can see that nothing happened, and it's because this slider's down at 0. We slide it all the way up, and now our roughness map is actually determining what the surface of this object is like. Our reflection strength can be at 100%. Specular I'm going to bring all the way down, because like I said before, it's a fake reflection. The bump strength, there's nothing in there, so this will actually have not much effect on the surface at all as far as I'm aware, but we're going to leave that at 100% anyway. The layer color for the dielectric should always remain white, so we can close that up as well. Mask, we don't need one, that can be left alone, and the layer Fresnel needs to be set to dielectric. It's looking a bit more natural now. We can close that back up. Layer sampling, again, we can leave that all alone. Now, you might be thinking, what about the index of refraction? This can actually stay where it is. This is actually an acceptable IOR for the surface we're looking at, and yeah, we can leave that alone. So now, let's have a look at our material now. Let's open our scene and come out of the camera and see if we can get some... well, it's a little bit hard because I'm just using a HDR to light this, but if I were to create a light, we probably wouldn't see a lot actually, because I got rid of the specular, but I'm just trying to see if we can see any of that roughness definition. Probably, there we go, yeah, you can see some of it at work here actually. So it's definitely doing what it's meant to be doing. If we go back into our camera view and give the scene a render, I'd say that's pretty good. We've picked out the details, it looks correct. And that's great. So you're probably thinking, well, what about the metal map at this point? Well, we can actually set up a metal layer if we wanted to, but with this material, there's not much point, because if I open up this and, for argument's sake, let's add another GGX, and in the layer color, let's have a look at the metal map. Here we go. So this wooden floor metallic map, it only contains information about whether something's metal or not. And in this case, it's a wooden floor, so there is no metal. And if you actually look at the map itself, we can actually increase its size. It's completely black. So we know there's no metal in there. It'd be pointless using it. So as far as this material goes, we can not worry about a metallic layer. And if we open up our picture viewer and have a look at that and then compare it to our actual wooden floor material in Unity, I can honestly say that's pretty much spot on. Something else we should probably talk about while we're doing this at this stage as well is the fact that we're using the color channel. Now, if you've watched my previous tutorial on setting up PBR materials for use in, say, ProRender, something like that, what we did there was we went create materials, new PBR material. Now you don't, this is just a preset Maxon have nicely set up for us, but you can actually just double click and create your own PBR material if you wanted to. But this is just a nice quick way of doing it. And if we look in here, in the reflectance channel, well, first of all, you can see that the color channel is not even on it. It's not even being used. And if you go into the reflectance channel, you can see that you've got a default diffuse, which has been set to Lambertian diffuse, which is basically what the color channel is. But instead of using the color channel, which again is kind of like a quick, I don't want to say fake, but it's not physically accurate because it's not based on actual reflection, where this one is. So if you actually wanted to set up your metal rough workflow for use in a PBR setup, you could do. So I'll show you how to do that quickly. We can turn off this color channel completely and we can create our own color channel in the reflectance layer. So we can add, we can go down to Lambertian diffuse, and then all we have to do in here is actually add into the layer color. Well, first of all, let's just call this diffuse so we know what we're dealing with. And drag it down to the bottom as well. Your color usually sits at the bottom. So in layer color, let's just add our color channel in and now give it a render. And you'll see that it's a bit more lighter, and there's a good reason for that actually. At present, this checkerboard material down here, we've got something in the color channel, this checkerboard. Now, if I turn that off, I've also set this up with a reflectance channel as well, which has got a checkerboard in it. So I'll turn that on. Now, our studio floor is using a Lambertian diffuse in the reflectance channel, and our wooden floor is also a reflectance-based material. Now the upshot of this is, and this is something that I'll probably make a video on in the future, this global illumination is no longer needed. Because the workflow we're using is completely reflectance based, well, I was about to say you get it for free, but it ain't free. It could cause increased render times and all the rest of it, but it's unlike the global illumination effect, it doesn't use samples to approximate global illumination and then sort of blend these samples together. It actually uses reflectance to do it. So if I give this a render now, even though this is turned off, we should still get global illumination to some degree, even in the physical renderer. And as you can see, it's taking longer and it's slightly more grainy. But we still have shadow that's been generated from the bright areas of the sky map, and we're still getting everything illuminated. Now you notice things are a little bit brighter, so you'll probably have to adjust things to get the result you want. Okay, so let's get this back to what it was, using the color channel. And this wooden floor, let's get rid of the diffuse in there and turn our color back on. Turn our global illumination on, and we should be getting a very quick result now because we're back to what we were. There we go, so that's our first material. Let's get rid of this and let's move on to our next one. Let's open Unity back up, which is this material, which is kind of like a metallic panels, if you like. And it's good that I've set this scene up in Unity because we can see what this should actually look like and what its surface behavior is. When we set up the material in Cinema 4D, we'll know whether it looks correct or not because we've got something to compare it to. So let's just go through this. Let's set up our new material. Let's open this bad boy up. And again, I'm going to go to the editor and choose 2K because I know that's how big my maps are. First things first, let's go to the color channel. Let's go back one and go into metal panels. And base color. So here's our base color. Let's put that on here. Diffusion, that'll be our ambient occlusion. Yeah, we can see that it's added a little bit of detail into those bits there. All of this we don't need to worry about yet. Let's remove that specular as well while we're at it. Let's go down to normal map, and again we'll select that, and again it is a DirectX normal map. In fact, this shows it a lot better. There's something not quite right here, and actually if we create a light, you can see that it probably behaves a little bit weirdly. Yes, it does actually. So let's drag this light, if I can grab it. There we go. That's what I'm trying to do. Grab this section of it. Now you see that the light is above this area, but it's actually dark on top, which is backwards, and we'll see the underneath bit here is actually being lit. And that's why we need to flip the Y direction in here so this behaves correctly. And now you can see that it's darker underneath. Let's get rid of that light. So our normal map is now correct. Next on our little list, we've got a bit of displacement. So let's load this up. Now I'm actually going to keep the intensity centered on this, I think. So let's grab the height map. You can see it being pushed out there, and I think that's a little bit of overkill. So I'm going to say 3 centimeters, because it should make these look like sort of puffy little pillows. Maybe even more subtle than that, 2 centimeters. And let's give that a quick render to see what we've got. Yeah, you can see things are being pushed out. Now, this is what I was talking about, the intensity centered or not. So this is intensity centered, and we're seeing around the edges some trouble areas, and this doesn't quite look right. So it might be worth to actually deal with that in the displacement and say, okay, let's just go for intensity and see how that looks. I'd say that's a little bit more subtle, a little bit better. But again, now we've got it set to just intensity, we can probably push these out a little bit more, maybe 4 centimeters, and see if we get a nice, yeah, there we go. The middle bits are being pushed out a little bit more. Also, something else that you should notice about the displacement as well, and I didn't mention it on the last material because it wasn't really relevant, whereas it is on this. Even though this box is subdivided, there might not be enough detail to get like smooth edges when it pushes this geometry out. So you get an option in displacement called subpolygon displacement, and you can choose what the subdivision level is. Be careful with this because that is sort of exponential. So at a level of 1, it will subdivide this once. At a level of 2, it will look at the previous level and then subdivide that. So, you know, don't go too mad with this, but I'm going to leave it at 4 and we'll do it again. And you can see that this is probably a lot smoother, a lot more detail in there as well now. All of that detail there just from maps, it's great. So let's close this and let's deal with the big boy, reflectance. Now we're going to deal with this one a little bit different to how we dealt with the last material, and I'll get into the reasons why in a minute, but you're probably thinking, okay, you add a layer, you make it dielectric and blah 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 and all the rest of it. So let's add a layer, let's make it a GGX again, the type GGX. The attenuation, I've seen that a lot of people have the temptation of changing this to metal because it's a metal. Don't do that at all, just leave this alone. And let's have a look at our roughness map. So again, we turn the roughness all the way up because our roughness map is going to determine that. And we'll open this up. Now while we've got this open, I want to point out something here. We could make a dielectric layer, but in this case it would be absolutely pointless, because if we look at these large and go to our metal map, so metal panels, this is our metallic map. Remember what I was saying before? Something that's black is not a metal, it's a dielectric, and something that's white is metallic. You can see that the entire map is metal. So there'd be absolutely no point in this case making a dielectric layer because none of it is dielectric. So let's just load our roughness map into our roughness channel. And also let's get our view back so we can see what's going on. And also let's get rid of this missing material now. Okay, so back to our material. So I'm actually going to name this layer metallic. So like I said, GGX average roughness is 100% with a map in it, and there it is. We can fold that back up. The reflection strength is 100%. The specular strength again I'm going to bring down. The bump strength, I'll just leave it where it is. Now with the metal, there's something else that we've got to do around here as well. But before I do it, I just want to go down to the Fresnel, actually. The Fresnel should be a conductor. Let's fold that back up. So the layer sampling we can leave alone. The layer mask we would need if we had a dielectric. And again, we're going to come to this in a minute on our third material, because that actually incorporates aspects of a metal and a dielectric on the same map. And that's where the layer mask would come in. Now, looking at this, you'll go, well, it doesn't look correct. And you'd be 100% right. If I rendered this now, as you can see, it doesn't look very metallic, but it certainly doesn't look like this in Unity. You know, that actually looks like a metal. So what is going on here? Definitely not the same. And there's a good reason for that. It's because of this color channel. This color channel, when used with a reflectance layer, it's more of an additive that's been placed over this. So this is not the way to go about this. So what we're going to do is actually turn this color channel off. And you can see that we've actually got it looking more metallic already. But what it should be taking its color from is the layer color in the metallic layer. So if we actually load the same map that was in here into this layer color, we should get a much more accurate representation of what's meant to be going on. So there we go, our base color. There you go. We've got all the struts in there now that are the right color, and we've got the surface of the metal looking correct as well. So let's just give that a render. There we go. That's much, much closer to what we've got here. Obviously, these aren't pushed out as much. There may be even a bit of darkness in Cinema 4D, but that may be due to the fact that our light's not as intense. All that kind of thing will play a part, but that is how it's meant to look. So let's close this. Let's delete this material and start from scratch. We've got a new mat. We'll put that on there, open it up, and we'll just go through as we did before. Let's get rid of this specular as well. So, colour. Let's open the colour channel and move to our wooden crate. Here we go. So this is our wooden crate base colour. Lovely. In our diffusion, we're going to want our ambient occlusion. And we don't have to worry about any of them. We can forget reflectance for now. We'll just go down here, normal. Let's open that up, turn that on, flip our Y direction. There we go, that's correct. Also, while I'm at it, and I remember, let's put this up to 2K because it's 2K maps that I'm using. And the last thing will be the displacement, and I think we'll do it very subtle. Where is it? Height. There we go. Lovely. This is way too much. I'm going to say 1 centimetre, and we can give that a test. Let's do some sub-polygon displacement as well, just to round the edges off a little bit more. So before we start working on our reflectance, let's give this a little render and see what it looks like. I love this. It's so great. This is essentially a box, but look all the detail we've got on this, just from maps. It's absolutely great. Okay, let's open this back up then and have a look at what we've got. Okay, this is where it's going to get interesting because we're using a dielectric and a metal. So let's do our dielectric first. GGX, average. Our roughness is going to be 100%. We're going to plug our roughness map into the roughness. There we go, there's our roughness map. And there we go, we can see that the corners are very shiny and this not so much. And specular strength can come down. Everything else can remain the same. As I said, because this is our dielectric, in fact, let me change this, dielectric, name it properly. And our layer color is white, like I said before, we leave that there, and we don't really need anything else going on in the mask and layer sampling. The only thing we need to do is go to Fresnel and say it's a dielectric, and that is fine. And now we're seeing the color coming through from our color channel. Now, on top of this, and it's important that it's on top, is our metallic layer. Metallic or metal layer. And in this, it's GGX. I'm going to leave the attenuation at average, put the roughness right up, because the sections of this map that are going to be defined as metal are also going to need information from the roughness map. So you have to load it into both dielectric and metallic. So in the roughness, we load that in again. Reflection strength is all the way up. Specular I'm going to get rid of again. And remember what I was saying about the colour in the last material we did? That we put the layer colour here instead of using this. Well, I'm going to do the same thing again, but I'm going to show you what it looks like without that in a minute. So I'm going to leave that alone for now, but we will come back to this. Layer mask, we're going to utilise that as well, and we're going to need the layer Fresnel. So let's do that first. This is obviously a conductor, this layer. Layer mask, let's deal with this first. Right, we want to mask what's metal and what's not metal using the metallic map actually. If we open this up and look at our metallic map, let's make this bigger. We can see that there's stuff on there that's white, that's metal, and there's stuff on there that's black, that's dielectric. So let's load that in. Now you can see that it's masked it out. Only apply this metallic layer to where things are white on this map. So let's just give this a render now and see what kind of result we get. Okay, not bad. I mean, these corners definitely look like metal. And they're definitely separate from this area here, and these definitely look like metal nails in the side there. We're getting some weird stuff going on here with the wood, very reflective, and I'm going to get onto that in a minute. But let's just compare it to our scene in Unity. Let's have a look at this. Well, the metal corners of this box are definitely not looking like what we've got in Cinema 4D. Much darker. So what is going on here? Well, like I said before with our other material, we have that problem when we use the colour channel. That colour channel is like an additive over the top. So let's open this up and get rid of that. Let's say goodbye colour channel. And in our reflectance for our metallic, this is where the colour map goes. So let's put the colour in there. But we've got a problem. Even though we've got our layer colour loaded into here now, in our metallic, we've got the rest of it messed up. And that's because we've got no colour channel informing the rest of this now. So what we do is we create a colour channel. So let's add a Lambertian diffuse, put this to the bottom of the stack, call this diffuse, and now we just load in our colour. So now we've got our diffuse, we've just this in there. We don't need to worry about the Fresnel or anything like that because it's a Lambertian diffuse anyway. So let's give this another render now and see what's happening. Okay, well, we definitely get some colour back into our object itself, but now these corners aren't correct when compared to this. And that's why I wanted to do this, because I wanted to bring up this opaque setting. If we go to our metallic, fold this up, and go down to our Fresnel and go down to that opaque setting and turn that on. Oh look. And the reason it does that is if this isn't opaque, it takes information from below it. Stuff bleeds up the stack. But if you say no, this layer is opaque, it will block anything underneath from coming up. So let's give this a quick render. Much closer, but you can see there's something going on with the top of this wood. It doesn't look very wood-like, and it certainly doesn't look like what it does in the Unity scene. Now, first of all, we're getting some speckling, and that's actually in the render settings. If you go to render, physical, that'll be to do with this blurriness subdivision. This deals specifically with reflections. So if we crank this up to say 5, which is probably overkill, but let's give it a go, you can see that a lot of that's cleaned up, and we'll do a comparison to the render before and this one. So that's cleaned it up a lot. But there's some weird highlighting going on the wood here. I thought about it for a bit, and I thought, right, what's going on in the Unity scene that isn't going on here? And I thought, okay, well, I'm getting to define what the layer reflection is. And I thought maybe the IOR's not correct. So I actually looked up the IOR of wood, and it was actually within range. It was like, yeah. So I thought I should probably leave that alone then. So the only other thing that I could come to was the actual reflection strength. And that actually makes sense. because wood isn't that reflective. I mean, obviously it has a diffuse reflection or else you wouldn't be able to see it. But our diffuse layer is dealing with that. Our diffuse layer is giving off the diffuse reflection of this colour, of this wood. So I thought, okay, well then what if I just pull the reflection strength of the diffuse layer all the way down? But then I thought, well, what's the point of having a dielectric layer whatsoever? If I've got this at 0, what happens when I turn this off? Okay, we're getting a little bit of difference there, but not by much. So I thought maybe I just need to tweak this then. So maybe 25%. So let's give this a go. Well, that's much, much better. It's a lot more natural and it definitely looks way closer to what we got here. Anyway, so that's, as far as I can figure out, the correct way to apply a metal rough workflow in Cinema 4D. I hope it helps someone, and I'll see you in the next video. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell to be notified of new tutorials. You can follow me on social media at Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram, and make sure to visit me at digitalmeet.uk where you can vote for upcoming tutorials. Thanks for watching, bye!